This KFAN podcast is sponsored by Builders and Remodelers, exclusive Twin Cities provider of Elements Windows. Get the highest quality windows at unmatchable value. Visit buildersandremodelers.com for more details.
Check out the contest page now to see how you could win a pair of passes to an advanced screening of Jurassic World Rebirth, starring Scarlett Johansson and Jonathan Bailey. It's in theaters on July 2nd. KFAN.com, keyword contest to enter.
Texts are pouring in on our conversation with our in-studio guest, John Millea, who is wrapping up a terrific 15-year run writing at the MSHSL website. And, of course, before that was Star Tribune, worked other places as well, been in the newspaper business, as he reminds us, for 51 years.
That's the cleanest you've ever said, MSHSL,
I have
consistently,
a problem with
by
that.
the way.
Yeah.
But
I never do it well for some reason.
I think John's presence
Maybe
is
that's what
lifting
it is.
your game, the respect.
Well, I have to go that deliberate. If I go faster, then
It's unwieldy.
it's not good.
In our house, we just say mashizzle.
Oh, that's not bad. I didn't even think of that.
Some of our daughter's college
It's a good
friends
idea.
came up with that.
It's
I was mashizzle John.
Much easier.
Yeah.
Let's get to a few texts here. This is from 218 guy. Congrats, John. Love your work and the spotlight you gave smaller schools up north. I recall being in the stands at Williams Arena for my alma mater's run to their first and only state Class A girls basketball championship in 2014, Winnemac High in Erskine. And the media notes you put out explaining what our school name stood for was well received. Thanks and congrats on a fantastic career. To that end, Scott McCready, AD, St. Charles High School. John is way too humble. He has set a standard nationwide among high school associations of how to promote the positive impact of high school activities. I assume you don't mind hearing those kind words, do you?
Scott McCready is a great friend of mine. He's one of many, many people around this state who are so devoted to high school kids.
Those are nice words. They got to be nice to hear at this point.
Oh, yeah.
Another texter, 952, wants to know maybe some of your favorite high school venues across the state, whether we're talking about rinks, gyms, stadiums, etc.
I've been to a lot of them. The old school football fields, Hastings, it's a turf field. It's fine. I was there before it had turf, just surrounded by a rock wall right in the middle of town. The teams used to dress I think it was an elementary school across the street, so the Hastings PD would have to come out and stop traffic so the teams could walk across the highway to the stadium. Just stuff like that. International Falls has a stadium. It was a WPA project way back when. Just all the history of those kinds of things. And the little towns where the football field is the outfield for the baseball team. And visiting
That's great.
bleachers, little set of bleachers on second base looking out. And the one strand of rope all the way around the field, that's plenty of security.
That's it. That's all they need.
Those are the greatest.
Those are outstanding.
The greatest.
Here's one out of 612 guy. I'm currently working on our 50-year state football championship reunion, making posters of old columns and pictures from newspapers, both in-state and outstate, having played Metro teams in Hibbing and St. Peter outstate in the playoffs. So fun to read the Metro versus outstate, including Don Riley, Gary Olson, Bruce Brothers, and many more.
I didn't know Don Riley, but Gary Olson and
the
Bruce
stories
Brothers,
are legendary.
Historic people that they had more fun than anybody. Gary Olson and I,
there's no doubt.
Gary Olson and I, when he was at the Pioneer Press, I was at the Strip. We covered the Saints together for a few years, just home games. We didn't travel much,
Sure.
but we'd sit in the press box together, and something would happen, and hit, error, fastball, curveball, whatever it was. And Gary's famous line was, "We don't have to get it right. We just have to agree."
That is a great line.
That's classic.
That's very well done. One of the other things I wanted to ask you about regarding outstate, there's obviously schools that have had to merge, so to speak, in terms of their sports teams.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how much of that outstate small town charm gets lost in the translation. Can you speak to that whole issue?
Yeah, from what I know, and my little high school in Grettinger, Iowa, now there's 4 high schools.
Is that right?
Well, they've merged with the Grettinger, Iowa, and Terrell. Used to be good rivals. That's one school. 2 other schools, Ruthven and Ayrshire. These are tiny schools. Used to be 4 pretty good rivals. Now there's 2 school districts. And in every sport, they co-opt to have kids from all 4 towns. And that's pretty common in Minnesota too. I think it's harder on the grown-ups than the kids when this happens. I've heard my mom told me that. She's a retired teacher down there, 92 years old, and I think the kids are fine with it.
Okay.
But it's always harder on the adults.
Because what they grew up with.
Thing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What are we going to have, which town is going to be named first, and then a hyphen in the middle. Sometimes they just get creative. And Tri-City United down south of the Twin Cities here. That's 3 little towns. We're Tri-City. We're United. They did a great job. And yeah, it's part of the landscape. It really is. There's not nearly as many schools. And some of these old timers who go back a lot farther than me, they'll start talking about old schools and old great nicknames that people 40 years and younger don't remember.
What, from your standpoint, is sort of the state of the state when it comes to changes you've seen regarding intensity of competition, quality of competition, whether we're talking about the big sports, the ones that we don't spend as much time about? What have you observed over the time you've been in this?
The whole idea of personal training is huge. Not, small towns, not so much, but it's still there. Some of those kids may drive an hour to Marshall or Rochester to go to a gym and work out in the off season. Multi-sport athletes, that's still a thing. At the big schools, less so, because it's just so hard to be a 2 or 3 sport athlete when there's so many kids, vying for roster spots. But it's that personal training thing, the Junior Olympic volleyball, AAU basketball. These kids, kids finish the state track, meet the next day, they're at their JO volleyball tournament in Cleveland or something. It's just they're so busy, there's so much going on. Parents and families, clearly they're going to make the decisions, and they should. But I worry about kids having time. I remember talking to old coaches. They could see these things beginning to happen. And a football coach, long retired now, told me, I wish kids had time in the summer to go fishing. They just don't. Some of them do.
Sure.
You work at the Dairy Queen in the summer or after school, and you work it in, you do your schoolwork, and you have a great experience. But kids can be really, really busy.
The burnout issue is what you're alluding to certainly some degree.
Right. And you talk to college coaches who say, we love multi-sport athletes.
Well, exactly. How many times, Guards, have you and I have talked? We've talked about this with guests and among ourselves, that coaches individually, they all say, we love multi-sport. And yet, in fairness, some of those same coaches, though, have so many demands they've now created because they say, well, I have to do it that way because everybody else is doing it that way, that it almost becomes a contradiction and almost literally now impossible to follow that track.
Yeah,
correct?
It's follow the herd. And there's a young athlete at United South Central, small school in Wells, Minnesota, pitched her team to a Class A softball state championship. Mariah Anderson, I wrote about her several times. 5'3", unbelievable pitchers. She'll face 27 batters and strike out 23. I mean, I don't know how many no-hitters and perfect games, but she's also a great gymnast. Her school doesn't have gymnastics. It's not big enough. Since she's a little tiny kid, she's been going to a gymnastics facility in Mankato. I was down there at a Thursday night softball game, and the next day she was competing in a USA Gymnastics regional at the convention center in Minneapolis. She's a national caliber journalist. And the coaches were telling me she's got another year of high school left. At that point, early in the year, the big-time softball coaches weren't really on her because she might go to gymnastics. We're not wasting our time. Well, she opened some eyes this fall, led the state in strikeouts, state championship. Phenomenal. She's 5'3" for a softball. Usually those are your 5'11" kids with those windmills swinging at the plate. She's this little kid, but she opened a lot of eyes, and I talked to her a couple times during the season and after the state championship game. She says it's hard to rule out softball after the season we've had, and she's in the driver's seat. She's got another year. If she wants to be a college gymnast, more power to her. But, coaches hear that, she might go into gymnastics in college. Well, then we're out, which is silly.
Johnny, give me, over the years, and maybe this is hard off the top of your head, a couple of stories that you discovered that fall into the classification of maybe, even if you knew something about them going in, that almost took your breath away or was so emotional that they stay with you even at this late date, 15 years in.
There were several high school athletes who were exceptional high school athletes despite missing a leg or an arm. I talked about a golfer who born with one leg. Her name was Tricia from McRae High School in southwest Minnesota. Born with one leg, but the family, they were golfers. Golfed with her grandpa, I think she told me. She went to state as a junior. I met her the following spring, wrote about her early. Her goal was to get back to state and win a medal. She used a golf cart, and other golfers who didn't know her, why are you using a cart? And she'd just say, fake leg. Just a really good kid. So we get to the state tournament. She wins like an 8th place medal. Her mom asked me to pose for a picture with Tricia with the medal around her neck. That's been in a frame on my desk for a dozen years or more. That was really early in my time here. And just kids like that. There was a football player at Stephen Argyle. They were a 9-man powerhouse. Just won state titles after state titles. They still hold the record, 76 wins in a row in football. A 2-way lineman fell off the tractor at 3 years old. Colby grew hot, lost a leg at the knee.
Oh.
2-way lineman in football. He played basketball. And his mom was telling me it can be really funny on the basketball court. He'd be going up for a rebound. Some kid will step on his foot and he'll come out of his prosthetic leg.
Man.
And people don't know it's covered up with a sock. And just kids like that. I mean, talk about determination and not being stopped. And in cases like that, everybody who knows those kids, it's no big deal because they've known them their whole lives. Of course, Colby's a football player. Yeah. We don't even think about his fake leg.
As I'm listening to these, I am reminded, it sounds trite to say it, but you mentioned it earlier off air, we were kidding about it, is you're not going to get rich doing what you did.
Right.
Financially.
Right.
But these kinds of stories, these kinds of connections you created, you can't put any, you can't calculate money on that.
There's no way to put a value. Money doesn't even factor in. It's just these relationships. And Tricia, the golfer, she's 30, whatever. She's a mom. She's got kids. We keep in touch every so often. We'll DM each other and see how she's doing. And that's the thing, Dan. When I'm done with this, it's these relationships that I'll miss. I'll miss the scenes of the state hockey tournament and Friday night football, but it's the people, all the officials I know, the ticket takers, the people in the concession stands that I know, and administrators and coaches and parents. But I'm not going anywhere. We have a couple of grandkids. They live outside of San Francisco. We see them as often as we can, but my wife and I have talked about it. We just can't see moving away. And at the state track meet last week, one of the officials, we were having a nice chat, and he said, John, I don't know how we're really going to miss seeing you at all these events. And I said, dude, I'm not moving. I can get a free pass. Don't worry. I may darken your door.
You might use your connections.
I might use my connections. You may see me before you think
Be careful what you wish for.
And my wife is a little skeptical. I can go cold turkey, but that's the plan. We'll see. And I'm not saying I might never write about these things
that's
again.
okay.
There may be opportunities. I don't know, and that's fine.
If Brett Favre can retire and unretire 4 times, why can't John Millea, right?
Why not?
What the hell?
Why not? I'm just like Brett
That's
Favre.
exactly it. So tell folks why now. Did it just kind of say, you know what, it's time? Because you're a young pup compared to me.
Yeah.
What made you say this is the time?
Yeah, 51 years has been a good run. I'll be 67 in a few months. My wife's been retired for a couple years. That's a big part of it. She's kind of tapping her watch saying, let's go, Grandpa. And not that we have huge plans.
Right.
We'll do some more travel. But it just seemed like it's time. I don't have the stamina I used to, to spend 6 hours.
It's a lot of driving, right?
Hundreds of thousands of miles. You name a town on the Canadian border, I've been there.
So
I name a town on the Iowa border, I've been there and all over.
When you, generally speaking, you driving alone? You have people along with you? What's the John Millea secrets to being in a vehicle that often? Largely alone, I assume.
The only passenger other than my wife on a long trip was our friend Patrick Royce.
Is that okay?
Very
there you go.
Early last fall, he rode with me to a 9-man football game, week 1, way down south in Spring Grove or somewhere down there, Spring Valley. And all we did was laugh. It's like 2.5 hours each way. We had a great time, beautiful night. And we just told stories about Sid and people we've known, and we had a riot. Neither one of us wanted to get out of the car. Yeah. He wrote a column about that last fall. And other than that, my wife has gone along on some overnight trips.
Okay.
She doesn't have that much interest in what I'm doing, but she doesn't mind getting away, hanging out in a hotel with her iPad and a magazine.
Yeah,
just to
nothing
get away,
wrong with that.
just take a walk, So no, I'm usually solo, and I'm
radio on, silence. What's the rule of
back in the old days when radio was? You get out in the hinterlands. I was going way up to the northwest corner of Minnesota one time. I was still at the paper for a just superstar girls basketball player I was going to go watch, and it was winter. There's a little ice on the road, 2-lane roads, heading north, keep going north, and Jim Paulson, our colleague at the Star Tribune was back in the. I bet I called him 4 times just to have somebody to talk to. There's nothing. I couldn't get a radio station.
Yeah, that's
Jimmy.
the
What's going on? What time is it there?
There was no iHeart. There was no iHeart app back in those days.
What time is it there?
Yeah.
But now, I mean, I've got satellite radio. I've got
it all.
podcasts. I listen to all the shows here, and it makes it so much better. I know where there's a great A&W drive-through in Albany, Minnesota. If I'm passing through, and
you're going to stop there.
And it's mealtime, that's where I'm going. Yeah, I know convenience stores that I like, some maybe not so much. So you learn a few things.
When you first took the job, I mean, could you have envisioned it would end up being as successful and as wide-ranging as it ended up?
I had no vision at all. I didn't know. Nobody did, Dan, because this was entirely new. I just knew that I like to be at high school sporting events and write about them, and again, not X's and O's, not here's who won and why. It's the mood in the locker room. I've ridden buses with high school teams just to be in that group, and like I said, everybody went to high school. A lot of us were on sports teams.
Yeah.
We know what it's like on that bus on the way after a loss. We know, and just to see those things and jot down notes and sit down later and write about it. It's just I'm going to be counting my blessings the rest of my life for being able to do this.
I don't think I read this text earlier, but if you recognize it, let me know, because I have been known to repeat them from time to time. My name is Jason Berg. Did I read a text from Jason Berg earlier?
I don't think so.
I am the superintendent in Farmington. I can confidently say that John has been one of the best things that has happened to high school sports in Minnesota in the last 20 years. He does a tremendous job of sharing what's right about athletics and activities and why it is an essential part of the high school experience. He will certainly be missed. Are they going to even try to replace you? Or is this it? Is it the end of the road for this job?
I think a person has been hired, a young person. I don't know how they haven't decided from what last I was told how they're going to do this. I don't know if it'll be similar, way different. I don't know.
Who knows?
But let me tell you about Jason Berg. I do know Jason. He's the superintendent of Farmington, a D1 football official, great guy. At Grand Rapids High School and Farmington High School, they do one of the coolest things I've ever seen. It's called Victory Day. Mentally challenged kids at Grand Rapids, they do it on a Saturday morning. Hey, you guys, not just kids, adults, you want to be on the football team? Come out Saturday morning to Grand Rapids High School. Everybody gets a jersey. They do drills with the varsity kids, which is great for the varsity kids.
Absolutely.
They all score touchdowns. The PA guy is screaming their name in the press box. The band can be there. So that's on a Saturday morning in Grand Rapids. At Farmington, it's at the end of the school day. Everybody in school, nobody's going home. We're getting out early. We're all going to sit in the bleachers. We're filling the bleachers. We're going to have Victory Day. Jason comes out in his D1 referee's gear, the white hat, and he's signaling touchdowns and field goals. And it's those two things, the whole Victory Day concept of just let's bring more people into this. Let's widen our scope. Let's do this for them, and look what we're getting out of it. You don't get me started on stuff like that.
So much knowledge at your fingertips, man. Yeah. So much history. Guardsy, anything you want to add here? Because this is been a great hour.
What happens to the car you drove all those years? And the Corolla, right?
Camry.
Toyota
Camry. Again,
with your face on it.
With my cartoon face on it. Again, the genius of Dave Stead. He knew somebody who knew somebody at Maplewood Toyota 12 years ago. Because I'd asked him, I was pounding my car and getting paid by the mile. Big checks every month. My car was just not going to make it. And I said to Dave one time, you think there's a way to get a car dealership to sponsor a car? Next thing I know, Toyota is asking me, what do you think of this car? How about these graphics? So my cartoon face is on the side, Toyota logos, a great big MSHSL logo on the hood. So they leased them to the high school league, not to me. 3-year leases, 4 of them, for free. This was a tremendous, I got this car to drive around. High school league paid the insurance, reimbursed me for gas. It ended kind of ignominiously the week before the end of our state tournaments this spring. I get an email from the guy who does our sponsors and marketing. Hey, the lease on this Toyota ends June 9th. And I said, that's got to be wrong. That's a Monday. We have 5 state tournaments that week, and I'm not going to Uber And he went back to Toyota Big Shots in Chicago. And June 9th, got to have it back to the dealership. So it got back to the dealership. I received clearance to rent a car. So I was driving a rental car for the last week of 30 months.
That's too good.
But it was a great thing. You know, I roll into a little town in that car. Everybody knows the guy from the high school league is here because there's the car. Yeah.
Tell me about the tattoos before we go.
Yeah, I have 2 tattoos. The first one was several years ago when I became a grandfather. I have the Gaelic word for grandfather. I'm not sure the pronunciation. Shanaher. And the way the internet tells me, Aher is father, Sean is old. I'm an old father. That was the first one. And this spring in March, I got the state of Minnesota on my other forearm.
Minnesota?
And I am,
even though you're not one of us.
I'll never be one of us, just like you. I'm an Iowa boy.
Astonishing.
We've lived here. My wife and I are both from Grettinger, Iowa. We raised our family here. We've lived here longer. I tell people I can go back to one of the 2 bars in my hometown, roll up my sleeve, and get in a fight.
That's tremendous. If that doesn't, grandfather you in, I don't know what will. But you'll still be told no. That's right. What we're always
You're
told,
never
no matter
one of
how
us.
long you're here.
That's right.
I can't tell you how much I enjoyed the conversation. To be able to carve out a spot. Unique spot, the way you have, that's everything, man. You did it. You pulled that off tremendously post a fine career in newspapers in the Star Tribune. And I can say this with all honesty, you were always one of the best copy editors to deal with because you just had a manner that was not panicky. In other words, if you had to say to me, Dan, we need to cut 25 lines from your column, you wouldn't say, bro, I can't believe it. We got to get 25 lines out of this thing. And you had that calming influence. You were a hell of a copy editor, and you were outstanding. You're just such a solid professional all the way around.
Appreciate it, Dan. And all I knew was when I showed up at work and I looked at the assignments for the night, if I wasn't running Sid's column, that was good. If I got the Dan B column, this was going to be a good night because your copy was clean. It was on time.
That.
It was just didn't even need to be edited. So
I wish I knew a long time ago you knew how to handle Dan. We would have called you like 20 years ago. We've been trying 30 plus years to figure this thing out.
Good luck, Garzi.
Yeah, so no good now.
John, thanks. Congratulations on a terrific run, and we'll try to stay in touch with us. We'll try to stay. You can text Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text anytime you want 64686. You might have more time on your hands to do it.
If I'm not mowing the lawn, I'll send you some texts.
More than welcome. Let's get caught up. A quick segment when we come back, then we'll prepare for Michael Hurley at the bottom of the hour and Kessler. It's often the case when we are chatting with our next guest, there's a crisis. And that doesn't mean that there are other reasons to chat with Michael Hurley, Minnesota's own. But that's sort of the nature of the radio relationship. When something significant is taking place in the world of terror, counter-terror, or certainly the Middle East, Mike is the guy we go to as one of our best go-to guests and one of our authorities. CIA officer for the better part of 30 years. His resume pretty well established. And for all the obvious reasons, we thought it'd be a good time to get caught up with him as well. He joins us now via the Connecticut Water Systems Hotline. How have you been, sir?
Hi, Dan. I've been great, and it's been a while, I guess.
Too long.
But it's great to be back with you.
Yes, it's been way too long. I apologize for that, and I'm going to make sure I'm vowing, whether there's a crisis or not, that that's not going to happen again. And so you are free to hold me to that. Unless you say, well, God, no, be careful what I'm wishing for here. I don't want him to, call me every other week because I know you're a busy man.
Well, I always love being talking to you and with your audience, and it's great. So I actually have there's a middle school from Lakeville that's coming out to Washington, D.C. They bring, I don't know, the eighth graders out every year at the end of their school year to learn about Washington. And I always speak to this group of eighth graders. So I'm looking forward to that. I think that's this Sunday.
Oh, no kidding. That's great. I don't know if we've talked about that before. What do you usually talk to them about?
I just talked to them about the possibility that, they're in eighth grade. They're not really thinking about careers or anything like that, but Sure. They're going into high school soon and maybe college after that, whatever they end up doing, and just letting them know that the things that they learn when they're out here learn about government, if they learn a little bit about the military or anything by going to some of the monuments in this area, that, these careers are all open to them eventually, like kids from Minnesota, and that I hope that as they go along, they'll keep learning, and maybe some of them will think about a career in diplomacy, for example, or in CIA or the FBI or national security in some other way.
There's a lot of ground to cover today, and I hope we'll probably just scratch the surface, but let's try to get to a couple of key points that I want to get your reaction to. I'm looking at a Wall Street Journal update from not that long ago. President Trump told senior aides late Tuesday that he approved of attack plans for Iran, but was holding off to see if Tehran would abandon its nuclear program. People familiar with the deliberations said Iran's well-defended Fordo enrichment facility is a possible U.S. target. It is buried under a mountain and generally considered by military experts to be out of reach of all but the most powerful bombs that, as I understand it, Israel does not have nor have the ability to carry them there as well. Let me add a quote from the president. Asked earlier if he had decided whether to strike. I may do it. I may not do it. The next week is going to be very big, maybe less than a week. So based on your gut, your experience, and maybe even people you talk to in the intelligence business and elsewhere, where do you think this is going? What do you think the likelihood is that the president will indeed eventually give the go-ahead to try to strike that particular location under the mountain?
So I read the same Wall Street Journal article, Dan, and my reaction was that, so President Trump always likes to kind of hold those cards pretty close to his vest, but he also kind of hints at things. This is sort of a classic response that he gave, that I may give the order, I may not give the order. It appears he's approved the plans that were presented to him by the Pentagon and in a Situation Room meeting recently, but he hasn't given them the green light to go ahead. So as that article explained, it seems that he's trying to ramp up the pressure on the Iranian government to get them to agree to some pretty serious terms and to abandon their nuclear development program. I don't know. It's like they're kind of in Tehran digging in their heels, and that I think the Ayatollah has come out and said that we're never going to surrender. That's kind of a typical response as well too. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if the United States got involved in some way. As you noted, Israel doesn't have the kind of bombs that would be necessary to take out that Fordo installation. That's the one I think that's buried deep inside a mountain in Iran, and they just don't have the aircraft that can carry a bomb that has the weight that's required. And I think the ones in our arsenal, what's the acronym? I think it's MOP, M-O-P, for massive ordnance penetrator. I think those bombs can blow stuff up down to 200 feet, even beyond, which is pretty significant. But I think they also weigh around 30,000 pounds or so. So there are very few aircraft. I think in our fleet of aircraft, it requires a B-2 bomber. And that's what would be necessary to really knock that out. So it's a really serious move. And President Trump, I'm sure, is weighing all the options. My guess is that he hopes, I don't know whether it's a strong expectation or not, but he hopes that Iran would start negotiating. But I don't see at this point Israel relenting. They'll keep doing strikes inside Iran. It seems like they control the airspace now. And, I'm not really speaking to the rightness or wrongness of their decision to do this, but this has started now, and I don't see it ending real soon.
So one of the apparent contradictions that's caught my eye, I'm wondering if you can maybe help bring some clarity to, because what I felt had read the last week or so was a pretty dramatic disagreement between the intelligence forces of the United States and intelligence forces of Israel regarding how close the Iranian program was to actually, being able to build and perhaps use a nuclear bomb. That in the case, the Israeli authorities, intelligence people are saying it's like we're right on the doorstep, but that the U.S. security people and intelligence folks did not agree with that. So can you speak at all to that apparent disagreement and how in the hell anybody makes a decision on how to go forward if indeed there's such a big difference between the two conclusions?
Well, the Israelis, it's quite possible they may be fudging their intelligence. That is, I think the Netanyahu government saw this as an opportune time to take some sort of decisive action and to just knock out the nuclear threat. I don't know if that's possible, by the way, but I think that's sort of the intention. So they may have had certain intelligence and then they're possibly spinning it. But it's also possibly the case that what the Israeli intelligence is saying and the U.S. intelligence is saying the same thing, that the Iranians have made progress in enriching uranium fuel to get it to the level that it could be used in a bomb. They made a lot of progress on it. Maybe that's what the Israelis are saying. But the U.S. position, I think the position of the U.S. intelligence community is that while the Iranians may have made that progress to enrich uranium to the level, I think it needs to be at like 90% pure or something like that,
right,
in order to be used in a weapon, that even if they get to that point or they're near getting to that point, they still have to weaponize it, and then they still have to have some method for delivering it. And I think the view of the U.S. intelligence community is that's still a couple of years away. And so it may just be a disagreement on those, additional aspects that would have to be solved in order for the Iranians to use a bomb. But this all gets into the question, like, even if they get a bomb, Dan, the Israelis have had thermonuclear weapons for how long? 40 years, 45 years, 50 years, and they have a pretty big deterrent as well too. So, it's really, I get kind of nervous and worried when I hear people talking about exchanging nuclear bombs and things like that, because in my career in the government, I had clearances at the level where I learned quite a lot about the damage that they can do. And I'll tell you, if that starts happening, it's all bets are off at that point. And we're in a world of hurt if either of those two countries were to use nuclear bombs.
The way it's been explained to me, not having exactly your security clearance, what's been written is when we think about the horrendous damage caused by the Nagasaki and Hiroshima bombs, that compared to what the possibilities are now, that would seem, as ridiculous as it is to say this, seem trivial compared to the amount of damage that this stuff could do today. Is that correct?
Yes, they're hundreds and hundreds of times more powerful in terms of their explosive might, and then you have the radiation to deal with as well too. So it always shocks me that we could be in a situation at some point where nations will use those weapons. They'll take out entire cities.
And probably more. I want to get one quick break. I've got more to get to on this story. I want to try to address with you another significant story as well. We are chatting with our favorite counter-terror and really Middle East insider and analyst at times like these, Minnesota's own, Edina's own, Mike Hurley, kind enough to join us. Quick pause, and we will get to part two with Mr. Hurley. Kessler in studio about 5. Mike Hurley is indeed back with us for a second segment going to the top of the hour and a Top 5 at 5 led by Guardsy as always. This may be an unanswerable question, but it's never stopped me before, Mike. I'm going to try it with you. If ultimately the U.S. or Trump does give the go-ahead to go with the mother of all bombs, and try to get inside that mountain and truly cripple the nuclear program of Iran. How do we calculate the escalation and what it represents in terms of reaction, in terms of more of our forces suddenly being vulnerable? How might that play out? Obviously, that's got to be a big part of the calculation, does it not?
It does, Dan. There are so many factors. You cited a couple of them. Our forces in the region, protecting them, that's paramount. Other Americans, American businesses in the general region, that's hugely important as well, too. I think that, I hope that our planners and especially our decision makers are giving a lot of thought to, I guess, how do you put this, the day after, right? It's not, you can take these actions, but then, and not just the day after, but obviously weeks and months and even years into the future, because everything changes if the U.S. takes aggressive military action. And it may lead to some important results if it eliminates, at least for a time, some of the work that's been done and the progress that's been made. But you're never going to be able to, there's no way you can eliminate the know-how that the Iranian scientists have. Some of them have been targeted, I guess, by the Israelis, but still, they've got the knowledge to do this. And so the country's a big country. I think there's 90 million people. If they continue to work on a bomb, what it's done then is perhaps delayed the getting one, maybe for several years, maybe even more than that. But you remember that the Israelis have attacked Iran's nuclear program, I think, 35 or 40 years ago, and then again about 20 years ago to set it back. But to actually totally knock out that knowledge, how do you do that? And then do we end up radicalizing, another whole generation of Iranians and other people in the region against the United States? That's a real possibility. I think that there are at least some that think that if Iran is shown to have very weak air defenses, and Israel pretty much controls the skies there and can go in and do what they want, and that kind of reflects very poorly on the leadership in Iran. And so at least there's some, I think, who think, well, maybe this could lead to regime change, that they'll be so weak that the people will want to throw them out, and then a new government could come in that would be more, open to the West and want to reach agreements and so on, and then things could move in a much better direction. But really, who knows? Nobody has that crystal ball, and it could go the other way as well too. Like countries, when they're bombed, people sometimes just get really angry and want to get revenge as well too. And it's possible that it will make people rally around their government, even as corrupt as it is in Iran. So it's just really impossible to say, but gaming this all out and trying to have a sort of the best calculation about what's likely to happen and assign probabilities to that, and then making decisions, that's probably what they need to do. But there's so much room for human error and just, our inability to see clearly what the future holds. It's just very hard to say what might happen if the United States gets directly involved in attacking Iran.
Is it possible, and then we're already seeing some signs of this, that the Iranian forces are already so weakened? Obviously, several of their proxies have been devastated to a large degree, at least for the present, by Israeli forces, that in terms of reaction, as in response militarily to put us in a vulnerable position, may not exist to that same degree because those forces are so weakened that they may not really have many options. Is that being too naive?
No, I think that's quite a good point. And you look at the past decade or 15 or 20 years, and you see all the money that Iran has put into supporting their proxies in Yemen and elsewhere, in Syria and elsewhere, in Iraq, really to cause problems for democracies. That's what they've done. They've let Hezbollah and the Houthis kind of do their fighting for them. And that's where they put their money. And they're sort of left with kind of a very weak Air Force and very weak air defenses. And so they've opened the country to that. On the other hand, if you think about it, so I think the question you raised is a very good one. But then it's also possible that their response could be, okay, we're weaker in conventional weaponry, so the only thing that will protect us in the future is a nuclear bomb.
Exactly.
And they could redouble efforts then to try to make it. And the country is big enough so they can do it in secret. And, Israel, the United States, and the West would be trying to gain intelligence on all of that. But, we might be right back where we are now, which is Iran doubling down on a program to develop weapons like that. And who really knows? But it's just very hard to see. But it's quite possible that there could be an okay outcome, but there's many directions this could go in that could make things really tough in the coming years.
You've spent a lot of time in the halls of power. I know you have great respect for separation of powers as well. How do you feel? Because part of the debate that's broken out here is that this is another example of the legislative branch ceding too much authority to the presidential branch, whether we're talking about this administration or even previous Republican and Democratic administrations, regarding the issue of needing congressional approval to go forward with this sort of act. Where do you stand on that whole issue of what this kind of act, what this falls under? Are we just used to presidents doing this to the degree that then there's not much of a pushback or debate? Should there be more, or what do you think?
Well, Dan, as you know, following sort of Watergate and then the intelligence abuses of the 70s, there were all kinds of constraints that were put on the executive branch by Congress. The War Powers Act, for example, and all that exists. You can anticipate or foresee instances where you want a president, because we've been attacked, for example, a surprise attack, to be able to act very, very quickly. That's part of the role of a president. But short of something like that, I think it's always best if the executive branch seeks the counsel of the deep experience that exists on national security in Congress, in the House of Representatives, and the Senate. That's in part what they're there for. And I don't think anybody has a monopoly on, one idea, but that getting counsel from people that, have the best interest of America at heart and will work with the president and trying to, give him the support, because just like an attack or something like that is one thing, but if there's going to be sustained conflict, you've got to have not just Congress, but you got to have the American public on board for something like that. Otherwise, it will deteriorate very, very quickly. So I think short of a surprise attack where the president needs to act just decisively and almost instantly, that seeking approval and authorization from Congress is a pretty good thing. One thing I was going to mention, Dan, I don't know, have you watched this streaming show called Tehran? Have you seen that?
No, I have not.
So that's on Amazon Prime, I think. It's a series. I think it's an Israeli series, and it was quite popular. There's 3 or 4 seasons of it, and it's all about.
I remember it now. Yes, I remember what you're talking about.
It's all about Mossad agents running around in Tehran, and there was an article that struck me recently that was really interesting by the conservative columnist who writes for the New York Times, David French, and I think Tom Friedman has discussed this as well too, but that show, I think, in some ways, because it's seen all over the world and in the Middle East, certainly, probably has put a degree of paranoia in the leadership of Iran, because it's all about these Mossad agents recruiting Iranian agents to help Israel in Tehran. And, it's almost like a case of, art imitating life or something like that, because David French in his column was sort of saying that the Iranian leadership must be pretty paranoid, because they're probably penetrated so much. You see some of the operations, and you and I talked about this, I think, a time or two when we spoke ago about those Israeli operations against. Remember when they took out some
Yes.
the leaders of what was it, Hamas, I think, in Iran, and they just pinpointed them, and so it's almost as though when there's a government meeting in Tehran now, the leaders must be looking to the guy on their left and the guy on their right and asking which one's the rat, because it seems like the level of intelligence that Israel has on specific locations of leadership in the scientific community and the physicists and those developing bombs and government leaders and generals in the Iranian forces is, it's astonishing. So your audience might want to take a look at that show, Tehran.
It's
really very, very interesting.
Yes, I think I watched the first year. We next, and maybe we'll do this next time. And we could have done this entire segment, especially with you as an intelligence officer with all that experience, just remarking and observing some of the stories that have come out about the technology the Israelis used to pull off some of these killings of key leaders, right? Going above and beyond the bombings in terms of nuclear thing. That stuff seems to be out of motion pictures or out of streaming series.
They're very skilled at it, and we can have that discussion, and it's apart from, what I'd say is kind of a discussion of whether Israel's doing the right thing or not doing the right thing,
right.
In terms of its future, but just to actually just sort of discuss the technical prowess. I even thought that I guess it was Friday when they launched the first raid on Iran. They sent 200 aircraft in, and all 200 of them returned to their own bases. That's pretty remarkable, actually. That they didn't have any casualties, and this could get really, really nasty, Dan. It already is. I think 500 Iranians have been killed so far, and I don't know, a couple dozen, maybe 3 dozen Israelis from the Iranian missiles, and I hope it ends soon, but we may just be at the beginning of it.
One last item on another subject before we go, because I know you still maintain great affection for this area. Being, you are a Minnesotan, and we had this. The words. It's just I feel like I cheapen it even saying words like unspeakable assassination, because I feel like even that's trivial. There are no words, I think, to fully capture the heinous nature of the assassination that took place of House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark, as you know. As well, of course, there were 4 stops made allegedly by the perpetrator, Vance Belter. He also he made it earlier to the Hoffman home, and John Hoffman, senator, and his wife Yvette, both shot. It appears they are both going to survive as well. As this story is coming into you, and I don't even know how it came to you exactly, and it's dawning on you, just what we're talking about here, the scope of what we're talking about here. What was going through your mind? What's still going through your mind?
Well, I'm heartbroken by it, and I think we've got to resist as much as possible this downward spiral into political violence, and I think it requires leadership of both political parties, everybody across the board, from political leaders to business leaders to community leaders to religious leaders, just to condemn any type of political violence. There should be no place for it in this country, and it's. I think some of this really, and I'm sure we'll learn more about Bolter and his mental state and whatever he was into. I know quite a lot has been coming out already about that, but I just think. I look at how the internet is used, and I think it's radicalized a lot of people on both sides of the aisle. And just across our social fabric. And, we've gotten to a state where if someone has a different political view than you, too many people characterize such people as the enemy, and that, they've got to be dealt with in stern measures. And I just think that's wrong. I think we have to resist that. I don't know how we pull out of it as a society, but people, I love the way the children of the couple who were slain,
Melissa
have come out and called for, for like, for peace and for people to love each other and to help their neighbors. And that letter that they wrote, I thought was just remarkable. And I think we need more of that. And we just, I think we need to reject, politicians who stoke violence, and we can't have it in this country. It's free speech, and people should be able to say what they want and argue for what they want, but there's no room for violence. So I was heartbroken by it, and I want to see all our leaders across the board condemning it, extending sympathy to the families and the victims, and just doing their best to try to change the direction we seem to be headed in our society.
Mike, I appreciate the time as always. It's great to catch up. We will not be strangers. We'll be back in touch with you before you know it. Be well, and thanks again for the insight and the time.
Thanks, Dan. My pleasure.
I appreciate you. Mike Hurley, Edina's own, a career CIA officer, worked Middle East post 9/11. Wrote a couple of big-time 9/11 Commission, helped write the 9/11 Commission report as well, and has been kind enough to join us many times over the last, I'm going to say, 10, 15 years, and we hope that will indeed continue. We're very late for the top five. There's a couple of juicy items, I think, one in particular that's at the top of Guardsy's list, correct?
Glenn Taylor scrolled Twitter and said, the Lakers sold for how much?